So this is an AirPod, most recent, and this is a Sleepbud. It's to be a little harder to compare, but if you run, we are less than a fourth of the size.
Wow.
And have to get greater time, right? You're talking about 8 to 10 hours of audio, including streaming. It has to be more comfortable. So there's a ton of challenges, right? Each bud weighs less than 2 grams, about a gram and a half.
There's no space for a battery.
The space is the battery. Like this whole thing is you are designing around a battery, and then everything is optimizing to power. The ear is by far the best place in your body that maybe isn't in your mouth to gather data, and arguably the best place regardless. There's a very well-known article where the author equates the ear to being the USB to the body. The ear has access to the brain. It's got access to your electrical signals of your heart, your respiration rate. It's where you can get your temperature the highest grade. Like there's a lot of things you can do from the ear. So we knew that going in. And sleep is kind of the holy grail of health data, right? So when we look at things on your wrist, on your finger, they can get you data, but they're kind of correlating to something. They're not the raw course. Firmware is everything. I think when folks talk about front end or hardware, none of it matters relative to firmware. And so we really treat it as that top. We have a pretty large, first party firmware team. My co-founder's background's in firmware. We have senior architects from multiple companies who work with us full time. Firmware is how you get everything, right? We've spent all this money to put very good chips and brains across the buds and the case. Now we need to do something with it, right? So our firmware engineers are involved in everything from algorithm development to implementation, activity, battery. All of those are firmware driven.
Welcome to Coredump Sessions, the podcast for IoT leaders, firmware engineers, and embedded systems enthusiasts. Each episode, we bring you insights from the leaders and innovators shaping the future of connected devices. We'll talk about what's breaking, what's working, and what it really takes to build reliable products at scale. Let's jump in.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Coredump Session. Today, we are talking about the hidden complexity of sleep tech. Power, comfort, and 8 hours of reliability. For those tuning in live, thank you for being here. One of the benefits of joining us live is that you can shape the conversation. Write your questions, and we will address them at the end in the Q&A section. Today, we are lucky to welcome Charlie Taylor to this Coredump session. Charlie is the co-founder of Ozlo, a manufacturer of earbuds you wear while you sleep. Charlie is a serial entrepreneur who previously kickstarted Bose's new business licensing practice. He's an engineer by training, and he spent the past decades on the product and business side of the industry. Good to see you, Charlie. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
As always, I'm François. I'm the founder of Memfault and current VP of Software Services at Nordic Semiconductors. And I'm joined by Chris Coleman, my co-founder and our engineering leader. Chris, good to see you as always. Happy
good
Tuesday.
To see you too. Looking forward to this conversation today.
All right. So Charlie, before we go into Ozlo, I'd love to talk a little bit about you. I think we've got a good number of listeners who are early in their career, or they may even be students who are thinking about the hardware business, embedded software, and how they may get into this industry. So how did you get here? What is your path, right? From a, once engineering student to an entrepreneur in the hardware industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think by accident is the probably most hardware folks answer.
Right.
My background is mechanical engineering. So I think by then you kind of get attracted to physical things. Software to me felt like languages, right? I can get it, I can see it, but I couldn't feel it. And so I always gravitated towards physical products. My first companies were software though, just by nature of software is a lot easier. And it's something that you have to remind yourself later that remember when you didn't do hardware and software was easier. And just happened to start some software companies, got lucky, met the right people, eventually ended up at Bose, which is really the first consumer-focused hardware, and then got the bug because while hardware is hard, there are a few things more satisfying than holding a product that you've made in your hands.
Yeah, and also for me, I've always told folks that your customers build an emotional connection to your product that they will never build, I think, with a software product, although that was maybe before AI bursted into the scene and people started falling in love with the app in their pocket. But still, I remember when I worked at Pebble, having people stop me because I wore a Pebble shirt on the Caltrain in California and tell me this was their favorite thing they owned. And that was so, that kind of relationship you can have with physical thing is really rewarding, I find. Do people stop you on the train and tell you, Ozlo, you've changed my life? I can sleep now?
Yeah, I certainly stopped on a train. I think most interesting, I was at a conference wearing, Ozlo branded, and Equifax or someone had a magician that they had hired. And the magician started screaming, Ozlo, Ozlo, Ozlo. And I was like, okay, I guess he's trying to sell me. He wasn't. It was his wife was a user, and it was, for us, it was his first time in years that he was able to sleep with his wife in the same bed. And so he saw the logo and it had to go have a conversation. So, we have definitely get that on the emotional side, right? People are very emotionally invested in our product. When it works for them, they're getting better sleep. And so people get very vocal. Of course, that comes on both sides, right? It's vocal good and bad. But for the most part, yeah, people get very excited when they see it and recognize it, which is always a nice feeling.
So let's back up a little. What's the problem that you solve, and how did this problem become meaningful to you personally?
Yeah, I think at the highest level, it's helping people sleep, specifically in the presence of noise. This is a product that was kickstarted at Bose many years ago. One of my co-founders was employee number one. And it really was, how can you use audio to improve people's life, right? That's the standard Bose. I'm sure most audio companies would look at them the same way. And a third of our life is spent sleeping, and sleep is specifically something that is so susceptible to noise. And so can you create a product that goes beyond the products that currently exist to help people sleep with the power of audio? So it's a very simple concept. We always say our only job is to help you sleep.
And so how did you go from being at Bose, working on this concept, to, taking it, spinning it off and building your business? What was the moment you realized that that's what you needed to do? What has been the advantage of being able to be a startup?
Yeah. So my co-founders and I, we always loved this product when it was sold at Bose. We think Bose really hit the mark of something customers really wanted, not just from market demand, but when you actually speak to folks who use the product, and there were earlier versions, again, out as early as 2017, 2018, changed people's lives. And there are very few things, particularly in consumer electronics, especially in audio, but in general, that it's not just made your day a little better or made it a little easier to cook something, right? There's very few products that actually have changed people's lives. And this was so clearly that, right? People, when they had a first product and had come off market to a second, every time there was a gap where the product wasn't available, it was the most vocal that at least we had seen customers, right? Folks very upset. When is it coming back? How can I get a new one? Please don't give up. We really, really want to see this product succeed. Because for many, it was the first time they were in sharing rooms again with a loved one, or just could sleep through the night because the neighbor's dog barks. And so when Bose had made a decision that, hey, we were going to focus on some other things, we were able to convince them that, hey, let us take this journey forward. We had talked about it previously, my co-founders and I, just about what this product could be, over time, obviously internal. And then we were able to take it, redevelop our own, and really make it a much better product. And with the benefit of, as a startup, we could really build what it is that we thought customers wanted and what we needed to do, and a little less restrained by a larger organization, and also take bigger swings that might not have the same outcome, right? When you're at a multi-billion-dollar company, everything has to be pretty calculated. You have a lot of brand equity that you can waste by making mistakes. It's a lot harder to learn in the open, right? People don't love to buy a big brand product and then figure out, okay, what's broken, what works, how can we fix it? But with a startup, particularly, how we've kind of handled our community, it's a lot easier to have your customers buy in early, accept early faults, and then help you build from there.
Okay, so you bought this IP, you got a few people from the team together, you started working on a product. How long did it take you to actually get something to market?
Hardware is hard. We had early prototypes, as many months in, and it still took about 18 months to get at least shipping, and probably 24 until it was ready. A lot of that is that, first hardware build, where we had a lot of advantages working with tier one suppliers, tier one contract manufacturers, and really a lot of access that you might not normally get as a startup, because we've had previous experience with them and they were making other products that we knew. Hardware, it's always something, right? For us, there was a semiconductor shortage. It didn't hit our semiconductors, but because it hit certain companies, they wanted us to upgrade those semiconductors. We did upgrade them. That changes all the firmware. everyone always tells you, and you know this, I'm sure very well, all the vendors will say, no change, no change, no change. It's fine. It's always a change. And when you're a startup, you aren't as staffed to really make that fix. So it takes a lot to build that foundation. And so whereas now, not to jump into our future products, we have a much faster development cycle. Building that all from scratch takes a little while. So we launched on Kickstarter, I think August of last year, not this year. And we have been generally available for about a year and a month on that product.
Why did you choose Kickstarter? What was the appeal of that? Was it, for financial reasons? Was it about validating the market? Tell us a little bit of how that went.
Yeah. Money is always good. We are venture backed. We've been lucky to have venture partners. But when you look at money, there's two sides. There's money to operate the business, and then there's money to show traction that people are willing to give their dollar. And I think particularly for hardware, because it's a one-time cost, you really need to show that someone is willing to pay upfront and they're willing to pay some significant amount, right? You can't give them a 30-day trial of software and hope it converts. And so what Kickstarter allows us to do is twofold. First, to tell the market, hey, this product exists again. We're back. The Sleepbuds is a very powerful trademark globally across almost every country. And to say like, this is not something that is going away. We're coming back. This is how we're coming back. This is all the features to start essentially making sure that void, the gap in the market is filled. And at the same time, showing customer demand, being able to test marketing, being able to build an early community. And with Kickstarter, their management is really great. They have spent a lot of time when you launch the program. We've met with the CEO, the head of the design, really making sure it's successful. And they really curate a community, which has turned now more into our beta community, where those Kickstarter backers are a lot more willing to take a product that is not fully finished. And the beauty of hardware with software is never quite done, but you have to ship the hardware. And so by having a community, it bought us 4 or 5 months of real world testing until we felt comfortable enough that the firmware on there wouldn't lead to a 30% return rate when we went generally available.
Yeah, that's a great insight. That I hear very often people doing Kickstarter for like market validation and, to show traction for future fundraising, for example. Very rarely do I see companies do a Kickstarter solely for the money. And in fact, you know this because you can see that the minimums that they set on the Kickstarters are always very low, so low that they likely couldn't just fund the product development from that. But I think they underappreciate the community of Kickstarter and how those people you'll get will be for many years your most fierce advocates. They feel like they have a stake in the success of your product. They're early believers, they're early adopters, they are very tolerant, as you said, of underbaked products. And product feedback, one of the superpower of the software industry is that they can iterate so fast and there's so much product feedback being integrated into products so constantly. And in the hardware world, because once you launch a hardware product and it's on the shelves at Best Buy, it's too late for product feedback. It's baked, the hardware is settled, and you're about to get reviews on Amazon, and you're about to get the big buyers putting in their buys. And so having this kind of liminal space between concepts and between full production where you can actually talk to your users is really, really helpful. And I think that should be the number one reason people do a Kickstarter. Did anything change? Did you end up having, did that Kickstarter moment alter your products in meaningful ways? Was there things that you changed?
Yeah. We didn't change much of the hardware. Hardware is hardware, right? But we always built to be an adaptable system. I think what it really did is help alter priorities on what we needed to build on the embedded side. Infinite amounts of changes. We put out new firmware less now. It was almost every 2 weeks when we started shipping. Now we try and do it less than monthly or every other month, just because firmware is quite a big feat to download on a product like ours. But we changed a lot. How things connect, feature sets, right? A lot of tuning in on what we really need to deliver and what's the most important. Less on the hardware side, just because it's a little late. But what we do know is, we had to create a lot of software workarounds to hardware that really dictate Gen 2. And again, we had the general advantage of starting from a pre-existing product where we were adding to it. And so we knew also what not to change. And I think there are a lot of things that I would love to change that would make a product better, but we can't change. Right? There are other limitations given the use case that did it make sense? But yeah, you get a lot of improvement. I still have folks from that Kickstarter who will text me almost every day and the performance from the night before. It's a product that they've had for over a year, for better or worse, right? I now have a work number. You learn quickly not to give people your personal number.
I think we
But yeah,
all learned that
they
in our
are.
first startup.
Yeah. I'd always worked enterprise. So you always gave out your personal number on enterprise startups because you want them to call you. The scale with consumer is a lot different. I never had hundreds of thousands of customers that might have my phone number. So yeah, it's, you learn a lot and you make a lot of changes, but most of it is really about optimizing for someone's experience and understanding the pain points, changing, the logins, the workflow, things that might get them caught up.
So tell us a little bit about what's unique about the design of your product. Like headphones and earbuds are a road well traveled. And I think many of our users have a rough understanding of what it takes to build earbuds, although I would suspect that they also underestimate how complicated these products are. What do you have to do differently, and where were the big engineering challenges is making an earbud that you wear at night?
So I'm going to do my best to not screw up the audio when I do this. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You did it.
So this is an AirPod, most recent, and this is a Sleepbud. And so I want it to be a little harder to compare, but if you run, we are less than a fourth of the size.
Wow.
And have to get greater time, right? You're talking about 8 to 10 hours of audio, including streaming. It has to be more comfortable versus maybe a headphone where we care about audio quality, ANC. Not that we don't care about audio quality, but there's a different fidelity that you're expecting, a different power, a different volume. Whereas we aren't looking at volume in the same, get to 120 dB, 100 dB. We look at what is a safe thing to listen to over time. So there's a ton of challenges, right? Each bud weighs less than 2 grams, about 1.5 grams.
There's no space for a battery.
Well, that is the battery. Essentially, the space.
Yep.
The space is the battery, right? Like this whole thing is you are designing around a battery, and then everything is optimizing to power. And so everything has to be custom built. If I were to build a headphone like this, I could use very similar specs and probably get you 20 hours of battery life, if not more, at a higher quality audio, just because of we're doing it. Now, that increased costs, which is always a thing that customers don't love. But when we did original designs, we thought, let's change the Z axis, right? And I'll put this in my ear so you can see what I mean. This is fully hidden, fully flat. We thought, back in, let's change the Z axis maybe a 0.5 millimeter. Sounds like nothing, right? 0.5 millimeter would be great. You get so much more space. Universally, it caused pain. It was not comfortable to sleep with. And so you couldn't do it. And so it's now, how do I adjust to kind of the constraints I have? Where can I go up? Where can I go out? When you're not worried about comfort and sleep, you don't have to worry about that, right? That if Apple wanted to go a millimeter more on the stem, no one would notice. Maybe a tech blogger would talk about it, but the way you wear it and the way you use it, it wouldn't affect much beyond that.
Yeah. Super interesting. I guess the size of the battery must be like a quarter or something, or half of what you typically have in a headset, I would imagine. Like, what was kind of the delta or the gap you're trying to close?
Yeah, it's smaller. I think obviously there's some headphones that might use similar size. A lot of it is what's their battery life, right? And so getting a battery this size to go 10 hours, typically if you were to put this in a headphone, these are in hearing aids a lot. There's a broader story on battery selection, but in a hearing aid, you might get 10, 12, 14 hours, but it's amplification. This is not a Bluetooth hearing aid, right? These are not being used to play and stream audio. And so it's much lower power, and you have a lot more space and a higher BOM allowance, right? A hearing aid costs thousands of dollars to have different parts to lower it. So it's capacity-wise, a regular headphone might have 50%, 100% more, depending, and still do 6 hours of audio. And so we're constrained by both the size needs to be smaller, but even more importantly, the efficiency has to just be much more.
What was your process for actually kind of going about and getting this made? It's like a pretty custom design, custom components. There's probably like, I don't know, 1 or 2 suppliers in the world who even know how to go about approaching this. Like I guess, what were some of the lessons you learned the hard way, or some of the parts that were the most challenging?
Lots of lessons the hard way, because that's hardware. Again, we had a very distinct advantage in having a relationship already with contract manufacturers. I think it's very hard to find good contract manufacturers, and we've been very lucky there. That being said, for us to kick off the design, probably most importantly, the previous product, we can look at it as a white noise earbud. And what that meant is all the audio was local. So they got it all the size, they got the power, but it was local audio. And the big thing we were doing is two things. We wanted you to be able to stream, and we want to be able to add sensing. And so you're adding two of the most complex things, because I think as all of us know, one, you're taking someone's actual sensor input. And so now you need a lot more processing. So there's challenge one with a chip that you're going to have to use that can do processing, both local and with streaming and with data. How do you get it off the device? Which means you have to introduce radios. And once you start introducing Bluetooth, in our case, Bluetooth LE, kind of you name it across the radio brands, it becomes way, way more complicated. And you talked about vendor selection. We knew we needed battery life. Battery life was number one. Comfort is kind of rule zero. If it's not comfortable, it doesn't really matter what you do. So everything is about comfort. And the next is how long does it last? And we knew that in order to do that, classic Bluetooth was going to create too much power and power draw. And so we had decided to use Bluetooth LE or low energy Bluetooth, but that is not something that is out yet. Right? It's not available on phones. It'd be nice. Some Samsungs have it, some Googles have it.
It's like trickling in there, 20, 30 something, maybe.
Yeah, it's
By the way,
always next year.
They call it Auracast now. I think that's the
yes.
word.
And the shame is it's super cool technology, right? It's lower power, it's higher fidelity, but Apple doesn't need to do it. They have their own stack. And so for us to get around that meant we needed to basically build something new and build with the newer chips, which is you have this case, right? Which has sensing and processing on it, but the case has to take classic Bluetooth and broadcast left and right Bluetooth LE, and the buds have to both receive and send back data, right? Receive audio in LE and send the data back to LE. So it got really custom, really complicated. The benefit of hardware, I would say, and this is now doing this, I'd say unfortunately, but I don't know what else I would do for 7-8 years. But, and I know François has talked about this before, what existed 5 years ago to get hardware done is nothing compared to what exists now. There's maker shops all over, really any town, any city. All of the big chip suppliers have really active sales engineers, I'll call them, right? Folks that will help you do chip selection. And if you could run through your roadmap, they're selling you, which is very different from you couldn't get in unless you were the big box buyer. So I think it's a very interesting time. A lot of the OEMs globally, more globally, will certainly spend more time helping you build a product, right? The CMs in Shenzhen and even in Europe will help you build. For us, it's a lot of custom PCBs. We had a lot of relationships. It's all tier one parts, meaning, we're using all silicon vendors that are name brands that could stand by their product. All these have costs, but they also come with really good support and really good access.
Is it possible to know whether people are sleeping or not from an earbuds? How deep can you go from this form factor and this location on the body to not just, as you said, make a white noise machine, but actually create a feedback loop and help people understand and improve their sleep?
Yeah. So we've always said that the system that we're building is really a delivery mechanism for everything else. And the reason we feel so comfortable about that on the highest level is the ear is by far the best place in your body that maybe isn't in your mouth to gather data, and arguably the best place regardless. There's a very well-known article, and I'm blank on her name, in IEEE, where the author equates the ear to being the USB to the body, right? The ear has access to the brain. It's got access to your electrical signals of your heart, your respiration rate. It's where you can get your temperature the highest grade. Like there's a lot of things you can do from the ear. So we knew that going in. And sleep is kind of the holy grail of health data, right? So when we look at things on your wrist, on your finger, they can get you data, but they're kind of correlating to something. They're not the raw course. There's a scientific reason for that. Has to do with skin membrane and things in the way of the data. Your ear doesn't have that. And so we're in the ear, you get theoretically, depending on your sensor suite, really, really, really high data. So what we use now, we're using in the sleep world, what we would call actigraphy. In the non-sleep world, we would just call it motion or an accelerometer. And we are deriving your respiration rate and your movement. We do it all locally. We're very big that between the case and the buds and your app, if you need to, we try and do everything locally. If you go and do sleep staging at a broader level, we will send it to the cloud, but just everything being private. And what that means is for now on the current product, while you're sleeping or while you're trying to sleep, let's say you're listening to a podcast, we're monitoring your environment. And then when we think you're asleep, we will slowly transition that into a white noise and then play an alarm in the morning. So that's like kind of the base level of what we do now. We've been semi-public about it, but we do intend to be able to read your brain. And we have a bunch of IP, some working products on it, brain and clinical grade biosensors to then deliver a closed loop. And so we can change the audio based on brain state, change the audio based on your heart, your wake or sleep, or just do things like detection of sleep apnea, epilepsy, things like that. So those are all down in the roadmap, but ultimately your ear is really the best place. And when you look at data, sleep is very consistent. People tend to go to sleep at the same time most days. They tend to wake up around the same time. There's less movement or less noise in data quality when you're getting there. And most diseases you can see present during sleep, even if you might not be able to see them during the day.
Yeah, it seems like there's a long list of things you could do, and it's an underexplored space. I mean, does anybody else make hearables for sleep? I think this is, you guys are clearly the leaders and pioneers in that space.
I mean, folks are coming back, right? But we like to say we're the original and the best.
So how does testing look like in the Oslo office? Do you have like a napping room where your engineers go and go test the devices? Easier to test something you need to do on a run during your workday than to test something you need to do while sleeping. Is there like every night a nightly build that all your employees have to test? How does it work?
There's a whole slew of different testing. There's in office with wires coming out of everything on electrical performance. There's mock ears, right? And scans, right? So you're trying to do performance from a digital. We've always had a very good user base. We do betas now. So everything that's going to go to production will get released in a beta. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of folks, usually a few thousand, that will download a beta and provide direct feedback. And then from an employee side, there is an expectation. Yes, it might be annoying while you sleep, but when things go out, there's all employee testing. It is hard. We do have couches in the office. We certainly have beds and that, but it's a lot easier to wear something for an app than it is for 8 hours. And so you really don't get the best data unless you're having someone sleep all night and use it all night. And we have the benefit that, our head of support has been using this product and its previous versions for 6 years. So you have folks who know exactly what they should be expecting. They've worn it every single night for a chunk of their life. And so you're giving it to them. So it's a combination of off-body testing really for high-level electronics performance. And then you can't make up real-world testing, right? Particularly with Bluetooth. You can do whatever you want in an office with Bluetooth, but it has a different mind of its own when you're in a home, depending on what your wall is or what today's day of the week is. Bluetooth acts different. So then we just have customers who act as our testers.
Wi-Fi routers is near
Wi-Fi routers
that are there.
Every Tesla chargers. There's like every little thing that has a connection messes with Bluetooth, but that's okay.
One of my favorite bugs that I feel like was only a Pebble office thing was we had enough watches in a close proximity where the Bluetooth chip would conclude that there were no good channels to transmit data on, and then it would just assert. And so the QA team would report, hey, we're getting a bunch of reboots. And I was like, you just don't see that density of devices trying to do or transmit the same thing at the same time beyond the office.
That we have gone through that. We've had to narrow our band for better connectivity. And it's always a balance between that. But it's a nightmare, but you need it.
I remember at Pebble, we had also the opposite thing that we needed to test sometimes where, one of the things that we find Bluetooth stacks are very bad at is how do you deal with environments when the device like suddenly disconnects, reconnects? Like how do you, coping? Most Bluetooth stacks are really well tested on the happy path, but the further you stray from the happy path, the faster they start seeing crazy behavior. And so one of the things we did is we thought, and we were a startup, so we didn't have any kind of chambers where you can do these tests. What we had were microwaves. And microwaves are pretty good Faraday cages. And so we would constantly put watches in microwave and open the door and close the door, things like that. And that allowed us to simulate some really kind of gnarly disconnection scenarios. This is the difference between testing pure software and testing hardware. You've got to figure out how to create an environment and what else you can use around you to simulate the real world. Because in the real world, people will put their watch in the microwave, actually, and that's not the least of the things they'll do.
But I imagine for your use case too, you're looking at, it's probably an aggregate more hours of constant audio streaming than most like kind of use cases sort of would demand, where you're probably running into some edge cases of like, hey, when this is going for 8 hours and there's some loss or some router transmits or breaks up, there's disconnects or kind of like other problems that people face that you have to work through that you wouldn't typically see. I remember at Pebble, like that was kind of the big thing for us because we were trying to be connected 24/7, right? To like a phone or a watch. And I feel like anytime you do that, you're kind of pushing the limits of the typical use case.
Yeah, I mean, we had this thing called going to the bathroom that created a real nightmare, right? People wake up in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom and still want to stream. And we're connecting to the case. The case is your hub, right? And so you're walking through a concrete apartment away from your phone, away from your case. And then you're wondering why, when I went 100 feet away, it disconnected. And, that was we understand what they're doing. So how do you fix that? We use on-prem audio, right? So there's audio that's saved to the buds, and people would have that on, but they'd want to still be streaming. And what that is for notifications, things like that. So then you go away. Well, Bluetooth standard, right? Not how we've now built it. As soon as you come back, it tries to connect. So now it starts to play the most recent thing you were listening to because it doesn't know you were listening to white noise. And so we had a whole lot of fun edge cases across from that. And again, as you're going 8 hours, you're absolutely right. Things happen, right? We had an early office where we had a lot of Faraday boxes, as you can imagine, to actually test things. And we couldn't figure out why around 5, we would just see worse performance, when you're walking in range. And there was something happening, resetting in the Wi-Fi in the building, right? That they would reset the whole building and to where it was still okay with the tolerance. Like it wasn't oh my God, what do we do now? But you see this data because we're running it all day and we just see this dip and you can't figure it out. So it required a lot of tuning. But yeah, people get up to go to the bathroom. They take one out in the middle of the night and throw it. People will in their sleep put them away and then take them back out and, wonder, hey, why isn't it still playing? I took it back out, but we turn it off when it goes away. So sleep is a very interesting use case because while people aren't doing much, when they are doing things, they tend to not have full mission of the things they're doing. They forget, right? You wake up all the time at night, but if it's less than 2 minutes, you won't know. And you do things all the time at night, right? People talk in their sleep. So you can imagine they pull, they prod, they plug things in. A lot of edge cases that we have to build around for 8 to 10 hours of use.
I wonder if you've ever had anyone try to swallow their earbuds at night.
I've gotten pictures.
Everything.
Yeah, we've gotten pictures of, I don't know what happened to it. Something happened and they send a photo and it's a clear chomp, like tooth mark. And we've been good to replace it, but we usually respond like, it looks like maybe somehow this got into your mouth. Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? And you can see the tooth mark in it. A lot of dogs, people do take them out and their dogs will go and bite them because it's, covered in earwax. I know it's gross, but leave your AirPods out and see what happens. So yeah, we people have put them in their mouth. Luckily, no one swallowed them. People have thrown them. People have taken them to the bathroom and they've dropped and fallen and gone out, Nemo style towards the ocean. But yeah, it's people do a lot of wild things.
Let's talk a little bit about the software. So, one of the things that I noticed about Ozlo from the outside is that one of the few companies who talks about your firmware. You announce firmware updates. It's really part of your product. Where there are many companies where, firmware is hidden. It's something that, ideally they wish it could update without the user ever knowing. So tell us a little bit about how you think about the firmware, whether it's, a critical part of the products. Is there a firmware roadmap that you've built? Are you treating it like an ongoing software product and project? Or how has that philosophy evolved?
Yeah, I mean, firmware is everything. I think when folks talk about front end or hardware, none of it matters relative to firmware. And so we really treat it as that top. We have a pretty large, first party firmware team. My co-founders' backgrounds in firmware. We have senior architects from, multiple companies who work with us full time. Firmware is how you get everything, right? We've spent all this money to put very good chips and brains across the buds and the case. Now we need to do something with it, right? So our firmware engineers are involved in everything from, algorithm development to implementation, connectivity, battery, all of those are firmware driven, right? There's only so much the mobile side and mobile software can do that's going to change the battery life. So everything is firmware. We also know that it tends to be the biggest weakness. People get most excited about firmware updates because those are the things that are most noticeable, right? Updating an app to have a couple more sounds, people like that. Updating the app to be able to be, more efficient and have power saving is something that our customers really, really respond well to. So we've slowed down a little. Only reason is firmware updates can take a bit of time, right? You have to update the case and the buds, and we try not to do it too often because when you're going to sleep, you don't necessarily want to have to update something. And so giving people the time and making sure it's really ready, and giving internally, we talk about testing, right? We do real world testing with beta customers. And so giving us many weeks of that testing before it goes live is really important now that we have, a lot more units in the field. But yeah, firmware is probably our largest engineering team. It is most of our work when it comes to making a product like this work. And when you talked about those edge cases, that is all firmware.
So how often do you update the firmware of the device?
Internally, every week. There's always updates, the constant updates, fixes, everything from efficiency to, hey, there's a new security stack, and we very much want to be on the front edge of privacy. So everything is moving. We try not to update the firmware more than once a month, ideally once a quarter for production grade. But in the meantime, we have a beta website where essentially once we start testing it for a few days, it will go to the beta website and they'll be told. And usually 500 to as high as 1,500, sometimes 2,000, less so now, but folks, real customers who will go and do the beta software and test it from there.
And do you see these firmware updates? Like, have you meaningfully changed the behavior of the product since? Like, have you shipped great new features? It sounds obvious, but actually talking to hardware companies, it's still something they're trying to wrap their brain around, right? Like for most hardware companies, the moment you launch your hardware, it's the best it will ever be in a way. Like you've done everything, you've tested everything, it works. And firmware updates are, bug fixing more or less, and potentially supporting a new standard that emerges or a new revision of your BLE 6.1 comes out and you'll add support for that. But it's interoperability and bug fixes. Do you have a software roadmap that's going to make the product even more awesome?
Yeah, I mean, these have been big updates. Our most recent firmware was actually turning on sleep staging, right? And the case bud sensors. So the case has environmental sensors, noise, light, and temperature. They haven't been on. They haven't been processed. The buds have actigraphy that was allowing us to do when I go to sleep, but not sleep staging. So all that was firmware, right? So our idea was we can release a hardware. We have this distinct advantage that the hardware is helping you do something. We've hit the baseline. We will help you go to sleep. And now we can use software to make that experience better. So our firmware has done the normal bugs, much better connectivity. We have done product improvement, which is better battery life. We have created a lot of the chips also, right, have low power modes that create edge cases that take a while to build around, right? Particularly in audio, some of these modes create artifacts, and so you can't use them. So how do you design around them? But yeah, our biggest has definitely been the most recent, which is the sleep staging, where we actually allow you to take that now, wear the buds, and the next morning understand how you slept, the noises around you, the temperature and light of the room. So that's been a pretty big update. It's public, but we will be releasing, hopefully it's still got to be submitted, but a therapy for tinnitus. That is also, it's a software. Yeah, it's a software-based solution that will just basically change the firmware and teach the firmware how to do our therapy, or tell the firmware, right, change your DSP. And now you have a completely different experience. It might seem similar, but this is an actual therapy that's all firmware. Same hardware, right? The goal has always been to build the hardware and then make it better and better with software. Then you can release another hardware and make it better and better with software and kind of just keep building on each other.
How do you think about do you think about or track kind of adoption of firmware updates? I think that's like a challenge. And to some degree, I feel like your messaging and your marketing, hey, there's all this cool new stuff here, might help a bit. But a challenge a lot of folks run into in the consumer space is it's not advertised as a feature, right? It's buried in some app or on some website. And then you wind up supporting the firmware from 2 years ago because 20% of your customer base is still on it. But I'm curious how you think about adoption.
Yeah.
Or kind of what you're seeing there.
Great question. It's twofold. So if it's something critical, which has only been once, and that was just, hey, we have a new stack, we need to change it because there's an update coming in with one of our SoCs, we need to have this updated. It will be required. And the tough part of that in sleep is we try to give people a week, 2 weeks of notice, because the last thing we want, people are really reliant on this. We have probably a majority, not just a plurality of folks who wear this almost every night. I think over 60% of people are wearing it multiple times a week. There are guys like me, I wear it every day so we have to test it, but I try not to because it is something that you will get so, and it's weird to say this about our own product, but you'll get so used to it, it becomes hard to sleep without it. We're testing stuff where I'm last night. I do not wake up. I'm a very, very light sleeper. I do not wake up when I wear them. And why that's a problem with firmware is if I am ready for bed and I open it up and I force you to update, I'm going to take 20 minutes away from your night. But not only that, you're furious. No one has ever gotten an alert to update a product. And I don't care what the feature set is. I don't care if it makes your battery life 50x and lasts forever. If you are trying to do something like go to sleep and I tell you you have to update, I am your worst enemy. We get the support email. How could you do this? You messed up my whole sleep. You ruined my whole day, even if it took 10 minutes. So we try not to force it. When it comes to building it, we build it into the app experience. It's part of where we talk about firmware as this ever improving product and not this scary systems update, right? I think we have a customer base, obviously newer, a little different, but they see the improvement, right? When we did one of our major firmwares, they added about an hour back to streaming, right? And to power. We were able to create new modes that meant that they could seamlessly stream and then switch to white noise in the while they were sleeping. So when you have features like that, people are willing to update. And we've been very lucky. There are certainly folks that every time there's firmware, they assume that firmware is broken and buggy, so they will never update. It's fine. As long as they're still using the product, we're okay with that. And in support, we'll even let them downgrade if it's not a security thing. We have very good adoption, but it's customer communications. It's less about feature set. It's less about how cool the firmware is, how fast it can download. It's all how do you talk to the customer and how do you prep them for that firmware update.
Do users have to use your app in order to use your products? So, and I guess I'll preface my question by explaining why I'm thinking about this. In the earbuds world, in our experience from working with a few companies, one of the challenges is the attach rate of the app. Right? Like most people, they'll buy a pair of headphones and they will maybe set them up initially using the app because they might need to configure what the buttons do or something like that. And then they'll never use the app again because really what they do is they put them on and then go into Spotify or some other app and listen to some music. And so anything like making sure the devices stay up to date or even collecting some usage data or any other things becomes really, really difficult. And this is something we care about, of course, because we are in the business of diagnostics and we need the bridge through the app to get the diagnostics. And because Apple, if you're not using the app, Apple will kill you in the background eventually. Same thing with Google, right? iOS and Android. So in your case, do they have to open the app to select the white noise they want to listen to every night?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes.
Yeah, so it's a big advantage.
Yeah, the first time you need it. Now it's a harder thing because of how our Bluetooth path works. People like to just connect it directly to their settings and go, and then get frustrated that, hey, how do I control it? So, well, yeah, that's kind of the whole thing. Where we have a couple distinct advantages, you name the first is the white noise selection, right? These are things that live locally. People want it. They do want the app, right? So think of it in that case, it's more like an Aura or an Apple Watch where people are going to do their presets versus an earbud because it's something specific to them for sleep. The other distinct thing is I would say the killer feature across everything, forgetting, we could play audio all night. Yes, we could stream all night. Even the toggling on and off is great, though probably 30% of our people will just only use white noise. So that none of that even matters. The killer thing is the alarm. And it's also one of the hardest things to build because Apple particularly does not let you create an app for an alarm. And so what that means is we can't be taking that data to run an alarm. And then a lot of people, as mentioned, 30% of our customers will be phone free, right? They set this up and they don't need their phone, right? Once you set us up, you do not need your phone to go to sleep. So then how do I set an alarm? How can I make sure the alarm goes off? And the answer is this case has a real-time clock. And so it's syncing all the time. And so you're able to then, without your phone, right? You got to set it on your phone, set the alarm on the case. And I think that those very quick feature sets pull people into using the app because maybe they want to see their sleep, but most importantly, I want to set the thing that helps me go to sleep and set the alarm. And now I get you into the app where I can see the diagnostics. We're, again, very privacy focused. So we don't necessarily pull all your data unless you're sharing it with us, but we are able to at least provide a much better experience than, say, a typical OEM, which is this I wish you used my app, but you never will.
Yeah, I imagine you have some folks who, I have friends, for example, who have strict rules that there's no cell phone in the bedroom, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that had to be something you designed for. Like the device has to work when it's not connected. The phone might run out of battery in the middle of the night. The thing has to work. It can't stop, keeping you asleep, because then people will be pissed. And imagine that, a disrupted night, it easily leads to a customer who stops wearing their earbuds, right? Like if the thing wakes it up, if I get woken up in the middle of the night by a device, I might do it twice, but there won't be a third time. So all these edge cases, I'm sure you've had to think about a lot. So you're going into the medical side. Tell us a little bit about FDA. I assume you've had to get this at least FDA cleared, or you're in the process of getting it FDA cleared. You might even had to get FDA approval for the therapy itself. How has that gone? What have you learned? Any advice you'd give to entrepreneurs who are looking at that process? Pretty daunting.
Yeah, I mean, we've made a decision really early on that this hardware, we do not want to be a medical device. When you deal with regulated devices, it's very serious, and it's maybe a bias, but a good thing, right? You don't necessarily want medical devices. I know there's a big push to have less, but when it comes to hardware, anything, right, clinical, you really need to make sure it works. And for us,
you don't want to move fast and break things with your pacemaker.
You do not want to. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to break things. But what is very interesting, and the FDA actually right now even has gotten really, really progressive on is software as a medical device. And that's being able to use software. There's a handful that have been approved, some on diagnostics, some on treatment. In the sleep space, right? There's therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia or CBTI. These are things that have been approved from a software standpoint. They can play on your iPhone, play through other things. So that's really our approach. We've gotten all the pre-regulatory. We haven't filed yet. We will move towards that. We feel pretty comfortable on that, right? It's a software ad that theoretically can work with many headphone platforms or audio platforms. The idea being that our delivery mechanism is the most appropriate to do it. So, the FDA has been, I think, pretty progressive in the right way. I think there's a lot of flack given to U.S. regulators over the last 20 years, particularly the FDA, of being slow. I don't think that's the case with software as a medical device. I think they're actually leading the charge relative to CE and some other places in a good way. And so, yeah, we look at that approach as how can we separate interventions, diagnostics, therapies from our hardware, but allow our hardware to be in a position where we can deliver those, or for our future builds that have a little more clinical sensing, can we enable other third parties, right? That's a little more unique to us, to deliver their own solutions through our platform. It does complicate things like support and documentation, but we've kind of built around that to make sure that we have everything we would need for a regulated product, even though the hardware itself is just like an earbud.
Wow, that's super interesting.
Right, yeah, I was going to say for the software itself, did you have to think about anything from a hardware perspective? Did you have to kind of be able to prove, hey, this is isolated from other areas that aren't kind of approved, or kind of what was sort of any requirement set or advice there for folks?
A lot of requirements. This goes back to firmware and depends what you're using. Therapies we're using now are not just by the nature of tinnitus. Those notes ringing in the ear. It's an audio disorder, audio neurological disorder. So it's a little different. If we were, I would assume, using like a clinical sensor, let's say, or use the PPG, right? You then need to show the FDA that your PPG works on par with other products, which is, that green or red light you see in there. So for us, it's a little different because it's just, pretty simple audio therapy. When we look in the future of what we're building, yeah, you have to show efficacy of the sensor suite. You have to be able to prove that it's working at a level that is comparable to previous approved devices. You have to document where it is. And so the best advice you can get is document everything, right? If you make a hardware that is a medical product in FDA, you actually need to any change, any complaint, anything along the full stack from development to post-market has to be documented. And if you build the system to do that, it's a lot easier than trying to retrofit it after.
So I understand right, basically, that you're not changing your firmware, you're not changing your device, you're basically changing the mobile app in effect. And the therapy is software running on the mobile side that broadcasts audio to whatever device is on the other side.
It will be, it's a little more complicated in practice. So we'll work on our Sleepbuds. It's built for the Sleepbuds. So the mobile app, and there's some changing rules, so we'll see exactly what happens. But the app itself will dictate the FDA process, put it that way. So anything required, which means in this case, a prescription, an audiologist, right? That will be verified. It will be run through a different structure. It does change the firmware in a small part. Think of it like a pocket of this firmware is based on this therapy, and everything is personalized in our therapy. I won't go into too many details. Yeah. It does update that firmware. The core functionality though is a separate bucket. So to change the volume, to change your white noise, to change these types of things, they remain on the core firmware, and you essentially have a regulated snippet code that goes in.
Yeah, so I think this is super interesting, and for those of you listening, I think there's really something to learn here. Is as you're a startup trying to build a medical or medical adjacent device, there may be a way to structure your products so that what you're doing is having medical software and a commodity kind of general purpose device. And if you can do that, it sounds like your path to FDA approval is significantly simpler because it's so much easier to iterate on software than hardware. Yeah, fingers crossed. Come back in a year, Charlie. Tell us how you're working.
Exactly.
We've got two questions from the audience, so let's touch on those, both from Tom. So the first one, and they're both about the product, by the way, which shows you how it resonates with people. The first one is, in effect, can you set up the sleep buds such that they can pass through things that you may want to hear, like your kids crying or something like that?
Yeah, so long answer is probably at some point. We have a capability. The case has a microphone. It is a higher risk than we might want, right? You don't necessarily want to be responsible. And it's such a unique thing, right? So a lot of people don't want to pass through with kids. So what we've seen in practice, most common is one of two things. Either one parent wears them when they have a meeting the next day and the other doesn't, or folks wear one earbud. That being said, you can control the volume to be fairly low and pick what you want. They're still going to be passive like earbuds. So many people will do it to help them go to sleep and have it turn off audio after an hour or two. So that way they can hear a kid crying. You'll hear emergency, sirens, things like that. They're already notched in the audio world, so they'll come through. But it becomes entirely of use. We are working on future products that can help us monitor kids and kind of sleeping families, we'd say, and pass through those alerts more live. But then you get back to all those earlier conversations of what happens when I want to turn off the radio. Well, people often very much want to turn off the radio, but all get the benefits of all the live communications. And you can't really have both.
Yeah, you already preempted my follow-up, which was about the fire alarm use case, which I know they're very specific frequency. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, something I've enjoyed throughout this conversation is the amount of sensors that you designed into the hardware up front to give yourself the optionality to sort of iterate on features based on demand from market, but not like building it all out for launch that's in place. I think that's not necessarily something folks always think about up front, right? Like, where might this go? Where might it be in place? And you just need to qualify that the sensor works, but you can ship an update that uses it in the future if that's what the market is demanding.
That was the goal. There's costs in there, but that's always the goal.
Yeah, for what it's worth, at Pebble, we've done the same, where we put an accelerometer in the watch, having a pretty good sense that fitness tracking of some sort was going to be helpful someday. But when we put it in people's wrists the first time around, there was not even a driver written for the accelerometer.
Magnetometer.
And the magnetometer. Yeah, the magnetometer almost was removed from the BOM and then rescued by software. But the second question by Tom, buds be used to help with lucid dreaming?
I'm not a scientist, so I won't speak to it. I do know that we have a handful of investors, again, not scientists, who have looked at learning through sleep, right? Phrase for it, but can you basically reinforce languages or others at night? There is some research.
Like subliminal learning or something.
Exactly. There's some research that says that maybe that does help, right? After you take a lesson, can you deliver that lesson during deeper light sleep? We also have scientists who would say, please do not have someone speaking to you while you sleep. Your brain is working. Let it be consistent. It's a pretty unknown area. I will say, I certainly can lucid dream on a good day. And I think the key, if I remember back in the day, of learning how to lucid dream is to recognize audio cues or light. And so, yeah, you could probably train yourself, but it's certainly not for us a a feature set. We have looked at using audio during sleep to affect dreaming, but that would be more for like a PTSD or some type of actual therapy where we're looking at the brain and can you insert audio to change someone's outcome.
And then last question from owner. So you went from B2B to B2C, and to your point, the interaction with the customers is very, very different. So now you've got hundreds of thousands, assuming you've got lots of people who use your device on a regular basis. You have some ultras who are super passionate about it, download the beta firmware, call your personal cell phone number to tell you how they slept. And then you probably have a long tail of people who just use it and don't necessarily interact with the company on a regular basis. How have you had as a product person to change how you deal with feedback, how you gather feedback and how you prioritize feedback? How do you know whether something really is worth doing?
That's tough. I think the biggest thing you could see from any type of consumer product is people who get mad. You get a lot more 1 stars than the people who love it. You'll get a ton of emails about people saying it's, this saved my marriage, this, I love it. They don't go on Reddit, right? People who are happy tend to not do it, right? We know our return rate, we know our use rate, right? And so we can see that by and far people love the product because they're using it all the time, right? But you're going to get a ton of 1-star reviews. Oh, this didn't work. I wanted to have ANC. It doesn't have it. 1 star. We never had ANC. We never said we had ANC, right? This doesn't work when I work out. I don't know why I would buy this. Well, it wasn't built for working out, right? It's called the Sleepbuds, right? They're pretty specific. So you get a lot of feedback, and it's unfortunately the good gets buried with the bad because you can see so much of it, right? We're getting a ton of tickets every week. A lot of it junk, a lot of it just people wanting help. So we've done a handful of things. The first is we have a pretty in-depth backend for customer service. We're switching over to one of the bigger providers as well to add a lot of AI, not to use a buzzword. We do a lot of sentiment analysis right now. So trying to carve out any 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 5-star reviews, understanding is this product feedback. We don't automatically add everything to the backlog. I think that's something I've learned from other consumer products, which any idea gets put in the backlog and now you get to say you have a big backlog. But we do evaluate what are the most frequent and what is the actual cause. Our support leads talk directly with engineers weekly. There is no gap of report up and send out a feedback. They're meeting with marketing weekly, again, support. So you have a much more direct relationship with the customer. And then we have general feedback. So we have a forum on Reddit. We do not, despite what people say, moderate it. It ends up going in waves of fans and people who are mad, as any, I think, consumer product does. But we just try and engage as much as possible and pull out as much value as we can as we go.
Awesome. And that's all the time we had. So we'll have to pause here. Charlie, this was a pleasure. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for answering our questions, both big and small, and walk us through some of the details of the technology. Thank you to our audience for joining us, and Charlie, looking forward to chatting again soon. And best of luck with your new development, new products, and great new ideas.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for the time, Charlie. This was great.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to this Coredump session. If you enjoyed the conversation and want to dig deeper, check out more episodes available wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, or at memfault.com/webinars. If you have any questions for our team, drop us a line at team@memfault.com. Until then, keep shipping. See you next time.